subscribe.
Hey everyone, Elijah here. I've been a paramedic for nearly 10 years. I don't have a platform or an outlet that allows me to share some of my unusual, mysterious, and sometimes eerie experiences from my job. So I decided to write this story and submit it to the Dark Diaries in hopes that they make it into an episode. If they do, I have more that I will submit at a later date. The story I'm about to share with you today still gives me chills. It was one of those long, seemingly endless nights at one of the hospitals where I serve. We paramedics are used to chaotic shifts, but that particular night was especially intense. I had attended to 3 cardiac arrests in a short span, and honestly, by the time I was done, I felt emotionally and physically drained. Looking for a brief moment of tranquility, I decided to head to the hospital's control room. It's the place where my buddy Samuel works. The room is filled with a series of screens showcasing every inch of the hospital. It's my little escape pod when things get too overwhelming on the floor. Walking in, I was greeted by the familiar sight of Samuel, immersed in his monitors, munching on his favorite brand of chips. We caught up, chatted about the day, and he filled me in on the latest happenings caught on camera. Among the lighter stories, like a visitor mistakenly entering the janitor's closet thinking it was an exit, Samuel pointed out something rather peculiar. There was this woman wandering around in the morgue. Now, the morgue isn't a place where you'd find visitors or patients just strolling about. She seemed to be checking out the tags on the drawers, looking for something, or someone. Initially, I brushed it off, thinking she might be a new intern or a staff member I hadn't met. But Samuel was convinced she wasn't. In fact, he was so concerned that he'd dispatched Alex, another security member, to verify. We watched intently as Alex entered the morgue. There was an attempt at communication. I could see him speak into his walkie-talkie, but we couldn't hear anything. Technical glitches with these devices weren't uncommon, so I didn't think much of it. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of escorting the woman out, Alex simply left and locked the door behind him. Why would he lock the door with her in there, I wondered. Moments later, he appeared in the control room, visibly puzzled. He asked about the woman's whereabouts, claiming she wasn't in the morgue when he entered. That statement itself was bizarre because both Samuel and I had clearly seen her on the monitor. And then, as I redirected my attention to the screen, the real shock came. The woman turned just enough to give a clear view of her face, and my heart dropped. It was a face I knew all too well. She was one of the cardiac arrest cases from earlier that night, a patient we had lost despite our best efforts. After a few moments of disbelief, I felt compelled to investigate myself. I needed to see this with my own eyes, to either confirm what we saw or debunk it as some tech glitch or our overtired minds playing tricks. Samuel tried to dissuade me, but I was adamant. I descended to the morgue, the chilling silence only interrupted by my own footsteps echoing back at me. Entering, I half expected the woman to be there, perhaps just hidden from the camera's view. But the room was empty. Hesitantly, I approached the storage units where we keep the bodies of the deceased. With every ounce of courage I had, I began to open them, one by one. Some were empty, others occupied, but it wasn't until the 3rd drawer from the end that I found her. She lay there, lifeless, exactly as we had left her after declaring the time of death earlier that evening. The same face that had been wandering the morgue just moments ago. I slowly closed the drawer, my mind struggling to make sense of what had just transpired. I returned to the control room, both Samuel and I at a loss for words. The atmosphere was thick with an eerie tension. I didn't know what to believe. Had our minds been playing tricks? Or had we witnessed something truly unexplainable? It took me a while to process what I'd seen. The entire experience felt surreal, and even now as I recount it, I struggle to find a logical explanation. The human mind is a complex thing, and sometimes, amidst stress and fatigue, it can play tricks on us. But what I saw that night was clear as day, and it's an image that has stayed with me. My name is Emma, and my twin sister Lena and I were 13 years old when my great-grandma Lillian passed away, leaving my family a property in the country. My family and I had just moved to the Wren's Hollow farm, and I watched as the last moving van drove off. A rush of excitement and anticipation filled my heart. We had driven for what seemed like forever, and the desire to stretch my legs was growing stronger with each passing second. "Race you to the woods!" shouted my sister, with that mischievous glint in her eye. Before I could even respond, she was off, making her way to the woods that lay just beyond the house. Not one to back down from a challenge, I bolted after her. I could hear Lena's laughter as she taunted me for not being able to catch up to her. Reaching the woods, Lena tagged an old, twisted tree and claimed her victory. Panting, I tried to argue that she had a big head start. Lena winked. "Always one step ahead, aren't I?" It was our running gag since she was born a mere 20 minutes before me. My playful retaliation was always to call her Old Lady. Exploring deeper into the woods, we were amazed by the massive trees that seemed to have stood for generations. Wren's Hollow was new to us. Our mom had spoken of some family disagreements, but this was our first time here. And then, after the passing of great-grandma Lillian, this property was unexpectedly passed down to us. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a path. There were old boot imprints on the dried mud. Could these be great-grandma's? Lena asked me, laughing off the idea and a few of Lena's ghostly tales. We continued our journey until we spotted an old hut. As curious teenagers do, we approached it, and to our surprise, found it filled with strange trinkets, jars containing peculiar creatures, and ancient-looking books. Was great-grandma Lillian a sorceress? Lena whispered in awe, holding up a jar with a suspended rabbit. The ambiance grew eerie and creepy, and I motioned to her that I wanted to head back. Later that night, I awoke to find Lena poring over a dark, ancient book that she brought back from the hut. She whispered about it being a book of spells, how witches' powers transfer to the firstborn grandchild after their passing, and her belief that maybe, just maybe, great-grandma Lillian had passed her powers to her. As time went, she lost interest in the subject, but growing up, I always felt like there was something different about me. After the day Lena and I discovered that old cottage and the dusty books inside, things started to shift in my life. Lena might have been the one engrossed with the occult and all those old writings, but it was me who felt its silent tug. As the years went by, the feeling inside me grew. Odd things began happening around me. Sometimes I would think of a song, and it would immediately play on the radio. There were times I'd dream of a friend I hadn't seen in years, and they'd call the next day out of the blue. It was a series of strange coincidences. But the weirdest part? I often felt like I could hear whispers when no one was around, soft murmurs that echoed old incantations. While Lena dabbled in the witchy arts, I kept my distance. I had this lurking suspicion that if I started pulling on that thread, things would unravel. But my curiosity about the supernatural world kept increasing. Every so often, I would catch myself researching the occult, trying to figure out if I really did have some psychic abilities or if it was just my imagination running wild. And then, one fateful day, my mom dropped a bombshell. She told me that the hospital had mixed up Lena and me when we were babies. A mix-up at birth? That meant I was actually the firstborn, not Lena. My head swirled as memories of the ancient books and the words Lena read flooded back to me. Could it be that the witch's powers had actually passed on to me? The firstborn grandchild, as the book had indicated? It suddenly all made sense. The inexplicable feelings, the strange occurrences, and the innate pull I felt towards the world of magic. I wondered what would have happened if I had embraced this side of me earlier, rather than shying away from it. I confronted Lena about the book she found and asked her if she remembered the part about the witch's powers being transferred to the firstborn. She looked at me with surprise and laughed it off, saying she had forgotten all about it and that it was just some silly old legend. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling. Maybe someday I will find the courage to delve deeper into understanding that world, but for now, I am happy to leave it alone. You know, sometimes life serves you up a situation that's straight out of a horror movie. I had one such experience as I was driving cross-country. My name is Paul, and I'd been on the road for what felt like forever. The next closest place to stop and rest was a small village, nicknamed Fenton's Hollow, where I was told there was no motel. I can't explain why, but driving along the winding roads, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something creepy about this entire area. Maybe it was because I was tired and the sun was going down, or perhaps it was just that the long drive was starting to get to me. As I drove through the village, a cottage caught my attention. Board available, read a sign on a quaint stone cottage surrounded by shrubs and dormant rose bushes. Relieved, I decided to park near it. 2 bicycles were propped up against the porch, which I thought was odd for a house that seemed to be out in the middle of nowhere. While approaching the house, I nearly tripped over my own feet when a voice from the corner of the porch said, "Can I help you?" It was a young lad, probably in his mid-teens, sitting in a rickety wooden chair. Before I could respond, the door of the house burst open, and a robust woman, red in the face, appeared. She had a warmth to her, but seemed slightly worried. She introduced herself as Linda and the boy as her son, Tommy. They both seemed nice enough, and I was tired and hungry. Linda offered me a room with dinner and breakfast that's so affordable that I immediately agreed. Dinner turned out to be an uncomfortable affair, though. Tommy had an unsettling presence. His gaze was dark, cold, and always on me. I could feel it, even when I tried to avoid his eyes. Linda chattered away about the village's history, trying to keep the mood light. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Why was there so much food for just 3 people? And why was Tommy not eating? Linda and I wrapped up dinner amidst uncomfortable silences. She then led me to my room, warning me that the house got pretty cold at night, but that there were extra blankets in the closet. She seemed apologetic as she said Tommy had some issues, and she had locked him in for the night for everyone's safety. That should have been my cue to leave. But exhaustion had a stronger pull. What exactly did she mean about safety? Anyways, I settled in, hoping to get a quiet, restful night in the quaint town. But you know, life has a weird way of surprising us. Just when I thought I'd get some shut-eye, strange noises began emanating from Tommy's room. It sounded like a mixture of groans and metallic scraping, and while it was faint, it was just loud enough to keep me alert, and not sleeping, I might add. I tried to convince myself that perhaps Tommy was just having a bad dream or something. Unable to dismiss the noise, I tiptoed to the window to get some fresh air and to see if I could hear the sounds any clearer from there. The view was startling. There, under the dim light of the moon, was Linda, busy working in the shed. What was she doing at this time of night? The scene was eerie, and every instinct told me something was off. And then, as if the night wasn't strange enough, Tommy's door creaked open. Oh shit. I could hear his footsteps coming closer. My heart was racing, expecting the worst. But instead he knocked softly on my door. As I opened it, the look in his eyes said it all. A mixture of urgency and fear. "Listen, Paul," he whispered. "You're in danger. You need to leave. Now." I didn't wait for an explanation. I grabbed my bag, thanked him with a nod, and made a hasty exit. As I drove away from that stone cottage, the mysterious events of the night weighed heavy on my mind, and my adrenaline kept me awake as I drove through the night. And to this day, I'm grateful to Tommy for that warning, although I have no idea what would have happened had I stayed.